Hello, I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this live broadcast, thanks to your generosity and recording, is to get up to speed with news from Dr. James Fetzer, and occasionally I will throw in for a few comments, which I hope have a little bit of value to them. And you might ask yourself, how is this appropriate to our work at the Institute? Well, we're here to develop a life of the mind, and shows like this help us to plug in what we're learning in class, what we're learning in our own readings, even if you're not here at the Institute, just in general. We learn in order to apply things. That's one of the reasons, at least. And it helps our to weigh things and to appreciate things when we can put them against current events. So with that orientation, I welcome Dr. Fetzer, and I'm going to very briefly duck out just to pour my coffee, but I'll be within ear's reach. And Dr. Fetzer, indeed, welcome and good morning.
Well, thank you, John. It's always a pleasure. We begin with Trump arriving in Saudi Arabia after Air Force One receives a fighter jet escort for the final 30 minutes. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. President Trump landed in Saudi Tuesday morning after receiving a dramatic fighter jet escort through the kingdom's airspace. Journalists aboard the presidential aircraft reported the Saudi F-15s cruised in close proximity, 3 on either side, for the final half hour of the flight. Trump's deputy chief of staff, Dan Scarvino, tweeted footage of the unusual escort while still in the air. Ben Solomon himself greeted him as he deplaned down a lavender carpet to an indoor meeting space where the country's de facto ruler hosted a coffee ceremony. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Energy Secretary Chris Wright, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick were among the U.S. cabinet members joining Trump's entourage. The streets of the scorching Saudi capital were lined with U.S. flags for the visit. Mobile billboards along the route have been advertising the just announced Disney Abu Dhabi theme park in the nearby United Arab Emirates. Meanwhile, Trump gave a speech some regard as unraveling current or past U.S. foreign policy, slamming neocons, nation builders. President Donald Trump traveled to Saudi Arabia for the first foreign trip of his second admin. During an address in the Gulf Kingdom, he slammed neocons and Iran, while also weighing in on Ukraine and Syria. It's crucial for the wider world to know this great transformation. He's talking about the development of Saudi Arabia now. Has not come from Western interventionists or blind people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs, he said. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that didn't even understand themselves. Remember, this appears to be a return now to the campaign policies of Trump, of staying out of foreign entanglements, ending the stupid wars rather than aggravating them and making matters worse, which some would suggest he already has done with regard to attacking the Houthis in Yemen. Trump added, no, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits, like those who spent trillions and trillions failing to develop Baghdad. The comparison of the Iraqi and Saudi capitals was notable as the U.S. spent trillions fighting the war in Iraq and attempting to rebuild the country as a Western democracy, where the project is widely regarded as a failure that may have led in part to Trump's revision of U.S. foreign policy. He also discussed his engagement with Iran. I want to make a deal with Iran. If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy, he added. We're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects the olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, we'll have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure. Trump previously stated Iran must agree to a new nuclear deal or face attacks from the U.S. Bad, bad, bad. Iran, of course, signed a nuclear agreement back in 2015 with the U.S., but Trump withdrew from that agreement in 2018 under pressure from Bibi Netanyahu, we have no doubt. While discussing Syria, Trump said Washington would lift sanctions on Damascus to give them a chance at greatness. The U.S. sanctions on Syria were part of Washington's regime change war to remove President Bashar al-Assad. After he was driven from Syria and his government collapsed, Abdullah Mohammed al-Jawlani seized power in Damascus. Now, this guy is a former Al-Qaeda, even ISIS, so it's really extraordinary what's going on here. And some have suggested it's because they're going to invite Trump to have a new tower in Damascus. Jawlani, a veteran of the Iraq War, co-founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, has been embraced by Western leaders. Rather, to my astonishment, his government has committed horrific violence directed at Syria's minority sect, including thousands of beheadings of Christians. John, I'm confident you would like to comment, please.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I actually recently did a rather lengthy poem on the war on terror leading up to the toppling of the Syrian regime in December, and people can access that on our staff publication page. The article, essay, poem is entitled "The Waxy's Dargle." But yeah, I'm very interested in this whole aspect. And you mentioned himself, Jawlani, being ISIS and Al Qaeda. It's amazing, Dr. Fetzer, how people can be rebranded. Were you able to see, or have you come across the silly video of Jawlani playing basketball and trying to look like a homeboy? Have you seen that?
No, unbelievable.
Yes, it's so silly. But they put it out on TikTok. So this guy, with a big old beard and a turban last year, now he's just one of the guys. And it's amazing how the so-called world community, or these globalists, just sweep everything under the rug and moving on, nothing to see here. Unbelievable.
Yes. Meanwhile, intensifies war in Gaza as the White House seeks a ceasefire. Unfortunately for Trump's agenda of peace, Bibi continues a genocide by increasing attacks against what still remains of a Gaza that's mostly leveled from 20 months of bombardment. Trump recently got a deal with Hamas to release Israeli hostages, hoping it would lead to a ceasefire. It only led to more killing. Over the evening, Israeli forces intensified attacks in Gaza, claiming the lives of at least 80 Palestinians. At least 50 died in a strike against a hospital in the north of Gaza, including 22 children. While Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu works to intensify the war, Trump and his staff seek to put an end to the conflict. We continue to work to get that war ended as quickly as possible. It's a horrible thing that's taking place, Trump said Tuesday. Again, appearing to break with Israel, which has pushed back against calls to end the war, arguing that it would leave Hamas in power. Times of Israel said Tuesday. Trump recently got a deal with Hamas to release Israeli hostages, hoping it would lead to a ceasefire, but only led to more killing. That attack came just a day after the Trump admin bypassed Israel, struck a deal with Hamas, long designated a terrorist group by Israel and U.S., which in my opinion is completely misdescription. They more properly qualify as freedom fighters for the Palestinians, who ought to be receiving all of our support and praise to secure the release of the last living American hostage held in Gaza, Eden Alexander. It was a gesture some thought could lay groundwork for a ceasefire, but Netanyahu made it clear he will not halt Israel's war in Gaza, even were Hamas to release all of its hostages until the stated objectives are met, dimming hopes for a truth, CBS reported. Unfortunately, for Trump's agenda of peace. He continues his genocide by increasing attacks against what still remains of Gaza, mostly leveled from 20 months of bombardment. In the coming days, we're going to be full force to complete the operation. While Trump met with Arab leaders in Saudi Arabia, the president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, commented that progress is being made on all fronts when asked about a Gaza ceasefire by reporter James Bays Wednesday. So I ran up to him, Witkoff, and asked him about both situations. I think his tone was pretty telling. He was very positive on both files. With regard to this war on Gaza, he said, I think we're making progress. Bays told Al Jazeera Wednesday. I said, progress on what? On getting aid in or on actual ceasefire? He said, we're making progress on all fronts. Trump said he wants U.S. to take Gaza and turn it into a freedom zone, making comments in Qatar before heading to the United Arab Emirates. Trump said Thursday he wants the U.S. to take Gaza, turn it into a freedom zone, signaling he hasn't given up on his idea for a U.S. takeover of the territory. He made a comment during a meeting with business leaders in Qatar before heading to the UAE later in the day. I have concepts for Gaza that I think are very good. Make it a freedom zone. Let the U.S. get involved. Make it a freedom zone. I'd be proud to have the United States have it, take it, make it a freedom zone, let some good things happen, put people in homes where they can be safe. But what kind of presumption is this? Here we have troops Trump meeting U.S. troops in Qatar. Trump first called for a U.S. takeover back in February and said it would be turned into the Riviera of the Middle East. Based on previous comments, his vision would require the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population, which he has framed as voluntary. The president said Palestinians could no longer live in Gaza due to the vast destruction Israel has inflicted on the territory. I have aerial shots where there's practically no building standing. It's not like you're trying to save something. There's no building. People are living under the rubble of buildings that collapsed, which is not acceptable. Israel's plan for escalation would involve demolishing any remaining buildings, concentrating the civilian population into a tiny area in the south, and pressuring them to leave. Though it's unclear if any countries are willing to take a large number of Palestinian refugees. According to a report from NBC, Trump is frustrated with Israel's plans to escalate in Gaza because he sees it as odds with his plan for rebuilding there. Meanwhile, Netanyahu says ethnic cleansing of Gaza is inevitable. The Israeli leader said the main problem preventing immigration was the lack of countries willing to take in Palestinian refugees, not to mention, John, that none of them want to leave their homeland. Israeli PM Netanyahu said Sunday forced removal of Palestinians from Gaza was inevitable. We're destroying more and more homes. Gazans have nowhere to go. The only inevitable outcome will be the wish of Gaza to emigrate outside the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu said at the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, according to the Jerusalem Post. Israeli officials have made clear the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population in Gaza is their ultimate goal, but it remains unclear where Palestinians would go. Netanyahu told the committee the main problem preventing immigration is the lack of countries willing to take them in. Israel has maintained a total blockade since March 2nd, developed plans to start bringing in aid using private security contractors in order to lure starving Palestinians into a tiny part of southern Gaza. Netanyahu said the aid would be conditional on the Palestinians not returning to where they came from. In other words, starve or give up your land. Netanyahu also said Israel was not planning to establish Jewish settlements in Gaza at the moment because President Trump is interested in having the U.S. take over the territory. Lamore's son, Har Milich, an Israeli MK member and of the Jewish Power Party, suggests that American Jews could move to Gaza. Bring the Jews from the United States. This way we'll hit two birds with one stone. John, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, it's something else altogether. How brazen Netanyahu and the fanatics, even more fanatic than he, are. Just saying out loud some of the things you've quoted here. Just ethnic cleansing is inevitable. Some of the generals that occasionally they'll use this horrible language. We have to mow the grass occasionally, referring to killing Palestinians. And I recall probably about a year ago now that in Manhattan, it might have been a show thing. I don't know. Maybe I don't know the legality of it, but I do recall there were people parceling off and buying up Gaza. Now that might have just been a mock type of thing, but there was a selling off of Gaza that was pantomimed, at least in Manhattan. And so the viciousness of these settlers and these Zionist fanatics is outstanding. And that's just talking about the land, to say nothing about the human cost of all of that.
Yes. Meanwhile, mainstream media blacks out the International Court of Justice hearings on Israeli genocide. Kevin Parrott doing a wonderful job. Look, from American Free Press, big media censors ICJ hearings on Gaza genocide. Of course. The first week of May 2025 coincide with the final days of the week-long International Court of Justice hearings on Israel genocide in Gaza. Representatives more than 40 countries, including Russia, China, Ireland, Spain, Turkey, Malaysia, and Brazil, presented evidence Israel is deliberately starving the population of Gaza to death. Israel called the charges anti-Semitic and refused to defend itself, of course, because there is no defense. Now, hearings came just at the moment 2 million are falling over the edge of starvation, as NBC reported on May 4th. Starvation looms as Israel's total blockade on Gaza enters its third month. Thousands of children in Gaza have been admitted to hospitals for malnutrition. But even as they waste away, doctors' options for treating them have depleted. The report began. Gazans are fighting under the last cans of food. Malnourished mothers are struggling to make milk for their thinning babies. Doctors have begun counting down the days before the slow death by starvation begin to happen en masse. Unfortunately, that NBC report is the exception proving the rule. Most Americans' Western media have downplayed or blocked out the true extent of the catastrophe. Owned and operated disproportionately by Zionist Jews who support the genocide, as Jewish former New York Times reporter Phil Weiss has observed, American media work overtime to avoid provoking the kind of public outcry that would stop the slaughter. Big media shamelessly avoided publishing last week's ICJ hearings, though they went on all week. The only New York Times coverage was a genocide downplaying article on the hearings opening of April 28th. The May 5th Google search for ICJ genocide hearings New York Times yielded only alternative and foreign outlet beginning with Palestine Chronicle, Responsible Statecraft, Turkey Today, and Al Jazeera. Conspicuously absent was America's newspaper of record, which remarkably enough is supposed to be publishing the official history of the United States, the New York Times. A search for ICJ genocide hearings in Washington Post did yield, as its first result, a Washington Post article, but it did not address the genocide in Gaza or the hearings devoted to it, instead offering the headline. UN Stop Court is to rule on Sudan's request, alleging Emiratis funded Sudanese paramilitary forces. When Gaza was added to certain parameters, which became ICJ Gaza genocide hearings Washington Post, the story on Sudan disappeared, but not a single article from the Post or any other American mainstream news appeared anywhere on the list. The blackout is inexcusable. ICJ proceedings are no empty exercise. They are foundational to international law, illustrate the kind of world order that will arise as the U.S. empire declines, and with it, the viability of the genocidal entity occupying Palestine. As a stable multipolar world emerges from the current chaos, international law enforcement will be hunting down the perpetrators of the Gaza genocide. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants last November for Israeli PM Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. As the genocide worsens, efforts to bring the perpetrators to justice will intensify. Already, Netanyahu and Gallant cannot travel to most of the 124 countries that have signed the Rome Statute, which established the ICC. Many leading nations, including France and Germany, have announced they will honor the warrants, arrest Netanyahu and Gallant, and hand them over to the court for prosecution and sentencing. Those prosecutions would likely echo the 45-46 Nuremberg trials in some ways. They would likely result in genocide convictions and would establish a new international order based on strong revulsion against genocide, coupled with a slogan, never again, which, of course, has been used endlessly by Jewish propagandists to promote the fable of the Holocaust, alleging 6 million Jews were put to death in non-existent gas chambers. It's embarrassingly bad. For an introduction, check out my piece, The Holocaust Narrative, Politics, Trump Science, on the government rag, but also at jameshfetzer.org. Unlike the Nuremberg trials, which were rigged based on lies and false confessions under torture, the new Nuremberg trials of Zionist genocide perpetrator would likely be relatively honest and just. And for better or worse, the genocide criminals would face only life imprisonment, not hanging, since the ICC explicitly prohibits the death penalty. Meanwhile, Israel bombs Gaza hospitals and camps as UN condemns starvation tactics. They were using those bunker busters, John, that were sent to Israel. Many at the time thought they'd be used against Iran. My surmise then was no, they're going to be used against Hamas because they have so many underground tunnels that the Israelis cannot otherwise reach and destroy. Your thoughts?
Yes. To an earlier point about freedom zones, not to be too tongue-in-cheek, but all of Palestine was a freedom zone before the Zionists showed up in the 30s and 40s. So, you had to deal with the subsequent generations there. But I don't think Donald Trump. I don't think that's going to do much good. Those freedom zones, but also to the starvation. I watch Al Jazeera, and in terms of just general coverage of the massacre in Gaza, they've been quite excellent, and they've kept a very honest editorial line about it. But you're at the point now where you watch these poor people, and it looks like those all those starvation things we saw on the commercials in the 90s with the babies with the pot bellies. I mean, it really is at that level of extreme malnutrition.
Yeah.
And part of it too, and then this is my final point with this fighting in Gaza, is the Israeli army doesn't seem to be that good at all. I mean, it has a very hard core of professional spies and operators, but most of it, my understanding is it's what we would call militia or part-time soldiers, conscripts, and they really can't seem to crack this nut in terms of fighting Hamas, much less Hezbollah. And it's frankly, I mean, it's terrible to see this long bleed out because of the incompetence of the Israeli military.
Well, and also the valiance of Hamas. Hamas is very, very good. And as the IDF is rather weak, which makes it lopsided, and this IDF really is incapable of making much progress. I do think that bunker busters were going to be used to severe effect against Hamas and the Palestinian people, as appears to be the case.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you have that absolutely that dynamic where you have Hamas is fighting for their people, fighting for their land, and then you contrast it to the Israeli soldiers who are conscripts that don't really want to be there. I'm sure a lot of them also have huge moral qualms about what's going on. There's a huge. This is not covered as much as it should. I mean, there are many Jewish groups and Jewish individuals in Israel and elsewhere that are just as outraged about what's happening. So that also is going to affect fighting zeal.
Meanwhile, we have a report about Trump's purported breakup with Netanyahu, which I only hope is real. David J. Riley tweets, just spoke with a general in the Mar-a-Lago crowd. He said AIPAC is getting shut out of the Trump admin, confirming Walsh was trying to undermine Trump by working with Netanyahu, really planning a war against Iran. And he's hopeful the U.S. will decouple from Mossad and MI6. Huge. Meanwhile, Trump's rift with Bibi might be irreconcilable coming from Zero Hedge. That would be a nightmare scenario from the perspective of Israeli interests. A report circulated last week alleging Trump cut off direct contact with Bibi after feeling manipulated by him. As sensational as it sounds, the larger context suggests it might be true. For starters, there's bad blood between them since 2020 after Trump reportedly felt betrayed by Bibi recognizing Biden's electoral victory whilst Trump was still challenging it in the courts. This is a very personal issue for him, seeing how he continues to exist. He won. So it wouldn't be surprising. More recently, Bibi's been pressuring Trump to bomb Iran, which Trump doesn't want to do, since a large-scale war in West Asia would offset his plan, pivot back to Asia for containing China. In connection with that, Trump reportedly dismissed former National Security Advisor Mike Walsh due to supposedly coordinating too closely with Israel. Also of relevance are rumors Israel was caught off guard by U.S. resumption of talks with Iran and is against any agreement between them. Then there's the U.S. recent deal with the Houthis, excluding Iran. Reports the U.S. will delete Saudi recognition of Israel from their civil nuclear talks, and even speculation Trump might recognize Palestine during his attendance at next week's U.S. Gulf Summit in Riyadh. Altogether, it's self-evident U.S.-Israeli ties are newly beset with a host of problems, lending credence to the earlier cited report about Trump cutting off all direct attack with Bibi. The rift might even be irreconcilable depending on Trump's next steps. It was already bad enough from Israel's perspective that the U.S. reached its own deal with the Houthis right after they announced their plans to impose a blockade on Israel. But delinking Saudi recognition of Israel from their civil nuclear talks, let alone recognizing Palestine, could cross the Rubicon. In that scenario, Israel and the U.S. would remain at odds during the rest of Trump's term, perhaps even after, if Vance were to succeed him. The consequence of that would widely reverberate throughout the region. Without continued support from its oldest and most reliable ally, still the strongest and most influential country in the world, despite the global systemic transition to multipolarity, Israel would be left alone to deal with threats from Iran and Turkey. To make matters worse, it can't be ruled out the U.S. might curtail or even suspend its military aid to Israel on whatever pretext, thus weakening its armed forces. This combination of factors could lead to Israel wildly lashing out against regional subversive adversaries in desperation before it loses its military strategic advantages, which could spark a large-scale war, or being coerced into a series of compromises that accelerate the loss of those self-same advantages. From the viewpoint of Israeli interests, this is a zero-sum dilemma it must avoid at all costs. Yet, Trump's potentially irreconcilable rift with Bibi could turn the nightmare scenario into a fait accompli. Nevertheless, As Trump's unexpected reconciliation with Zelensky shows, there's always a chance those tensions could be overcome. For that to happen, however, Bibi would likely have to give Trump something of equivalent strategic value to Zelensky's minerals deal. It's unclear what that might be, and it could be too late to stop U.S. from delinking Saudi recognition of Israel from their civil nuclear talks or recognizing Palestine. But Bibi would do well to make Trump a peace offering pronto. Meanwhile, Tulsi Gabbard calls for James Comey to be put behind bars over Trump assassination posts. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard Thursday evening, yesterday, called for former FBI Director James Comey to be put behind bars. Comey posted a cryptic message on his Instagram Thursday, spelling out in seashells 8647, 86 being a well-known term for executing, taking out, or assassinating, 47 being Trump's presidential number. I posted earlier a picture of some shells I saw today on a beach, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associated those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me. But I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down. Comey expects the public to believe that he, a former FBI director, did not know the meaning of 86. Comey's also implying he didn't assemble the shell formation. He claiming he just happened to stumble across the assassination message while he was on a beach walk. Yeah, right. Meanwhile, Tulsi calls for Comey to be put behind bars. The FBI, DHS, and Secret Service are now investigating former FBI Director James Comey over his Trump assassination social media post. We are aware of recent social media posts by former Director James Comey directed at President Trump. We are in communication with Secret Service and Director Curran. Primary jurisdiction with Secret Service on these matters. I think it's going to happen, John. I think he went a bridge too far.
Yes, it sounds like he got his he was caught with his hand in the cookie jar there, and he said too much and trying to cover that up. I wondered, you mentioned the so-called breakup between Donald Trump and Netanyahu. I'm just thinking off the cuff here, Dr. Fetzer. I don't recall during the 2020 election, which I believe was rankly stolen. I don't recall too much about Israel, but I wonder, and maybe you know something about this. You're much more versed in events and nitty gritty. So I'd like to ask you: do you think that Israel had part in the coup to put in Biden? And part of that is I also believe that the events of October 7th in Israel were also coordinated by the Israeli government itself. And so if you were planning on using October 7th as a justification to annihilate Gaza, I wonder if Israel had a hand in putting in Biden during that stolen election. Have you come across anything to that effect?
But it's a very plausible hypothesis, John. I'm fascinated that you would suggest it. Biden, we all know, actually wasn't even the real Joe from Delaware who appears to have died in 2017. The guy in office for 4 years had a different shape and size of cranium, different signature, different social interaction with Jill. So we had a fraudulent imposter president for 4 years. It's astonishing to me it was never called out. It was government by auto pen. And the question becomes, who was in control of that auto pen? I think that what you're offering as a suggestion is very intriguing and could very well be true. Meanwhile, Abel Child, homeschoolers hammer Connecticut with FOIA requests, expose pattern of state corruption from Sandy Hook to Waterbury. Connecticut's homeschool community is once again making national headlines as leading groups represented by attorney Deborah Stevenson have filed a new Freedom of Information Act request with state agencies demanding specific information about the tragic case in Waterbury of a young man held captive for years. This action is in response to a long-standing pattern. Whenever a high-profile tragedy exposes failure by state agencies responsible for child welfare, blame is assigned anywhere but where it belongs. And homeschoolers take the brunt of the blame game and are forced to seek transparency through FOIA requests, only to be respectfully met with resistance and stonewalling. In the aftermath of the 2012 Sandy Hook tragedy, for example, Connecticut homeschoolers, alongside national advocacy group Able Child, filed FOIA requests for shooter Adam Lanza's school and Department of Children and Families records, despite Connecticut statutes allowing for the release of these records in the public interest. Every agency refused to provide even a single document at the time of the incident and continues to withhold those documents today because, of course, they did not in fact exist. Adam Lanza was a fictional character in a fictional event, and it's outrageous. I expose it in my book, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, where I brought together 13 experts, including 6 PhDs, and we established that the school had been closed by 2008, that there were no students or teachers there, and that it had been a FEMA exercise presented as mass murder to promote gun control. I was sued as a consequence after Amazon banned the book, and I released it for free as a PDF in order to gain control of the then extant versions. I have since created a new redacted version, John. And if anyone in Connecticut or elsewhere would like to read the redacted book, go to my blog, jameshfetzer.org, and search on fake news, the truth versus Alex Jones, and you can download the redacted version of the book, where I removed the 3 sentences over which I was being sued over claiming that a death certificate for a purported decedent of the event was fake. Obviously, it was a FEMA exercise and nobody died. The only death certificate you'd have is someone, say, accidentally stepped on a live electric wire and was grounded, but it would be purely circumstantial, not a deliberate result, even though the death certificate states that the decedent died at Sandy Hook Elementary on 14 December 2012 of multiple gunshot wounds. I even had 2 forensic document experts issue reports to the court that all 4 of the then different versions of the death certificate in evidence were fake. All 4 of them were fake. It was not disputed by Leonard Posner, the plaintiff, and yet the judge just set it aside as not helpful, as he did all of my proof, so there'd be no disputed facts, which would have required a jury trial, so he could find me guilty by predetermination. I have no doubt there was collusion between the plaintiff's attorney and the judge, Frank Remington, to bring about the predetermined result. Despite Connecticut statutes, yes, allowing for the release, they won't do it because it reveals a scam. I respect Able Child and the homeschoolers for their efforts. Able Child responded suing the state, highlighting systemic secrecy and a lack of accountability. Able Child continues its mission, exposing the role of behavioral health and pharmaceutical companies in mass shootings nationwide. Yes, they place a lot of emphasis on the role of drugs. Some think even that was part of the objective, to not only compromise our Second Amendment rights, where Barack Obama signed no less than 23 executive orders to reduce our access to weapons under the Second Amendment just 1 month and 2 days later. But there was a big push for pharmaceutical treatment of children, no doubt running Big Pharma's profits through the roof. The mother's phone was disconnected. Matthew's sister came to school with bruises, reported abuse at home. This is a Waterbury case. Despite these glaring red flags, the public schools say failed to request a police welfare check. DCF knocked on the mother's door 5 times without response, filed a petition for neglect. The court closed the case after a 45-second hearing when the mother failed to appear. A few weeks later, Matthew died of starvation. It's a brutal way to go. Despite the fact that Matthew Tirado was never homeschooled, state officials blamed homeschooling and called for further regulation. Even after the state child advocate admitted Tirado was not homeschooled, calls for increased homeschooling oversight persisted. The mother's phone was disconnected. Matthew's sister came to school with bruises, reporting abuse at home despite, yes, there we have it. Meanwhile, a development in my case here, where I was sued and I've made efforts to have the case reopened that now appear to be coming to fruition. Governor Tony Evers names Assistant Attorney General as Dane County Judge. Assistant Attorney General Stephanie Hilton had been tapped to fill a seat on the Dane County Circuit Court. Democrat Governor Tony Evers announced this week. Hilton will fill a vacancy created by Judge Frank Remington's May 3rd retirement and serve a term that concludes July 31st, 2026. Now, Remington, as I mentioned, was a judge in my case. I have 4 appeals before the Court of Appeals, John, where I submitted the final reply brief in the case just yesterday. So they're now poised to rule in the case. Well, remarkably, Judge Remington retired on the 3rd of May, which was 5.5 years before his term was due to expire on 1 August 2030. And I can only surmise it was because he was concerned he was going to be recused from the case or even removed from the bench. Evers described Hilton as highly regarded attorney known for her integrity, prosecutorial experience, and a deep commitment to her community. She will be an exceptional judge for the people of Dane County, he said in a statement. Well, Dave Gahary, who was my publisher, interviewed me about this on his channel. He has it's called ftjmedia.com. ftjmedia.com, which he described now. We discussed a judge stepping down as a big win for me. You can find it by going to ftjmedia.com. You'll see in the menu bar Dave Gahary. It's now about the 4th most recent interview. Check it out. I think this is a significant development and suggests the possibility that my case is, in fact, going to be reversed. And you can flip back to us, John, and I'll talk a bit more about it. What we have is, very good. We have the bizarre situation where I have been informed Sandy Hook Promise, which is very worried about the reversal of my case because it was exposed all their fundraising, which continues unabated to this day, where they're raking in about $1 million a month, John, on the basis of a staged, fabricated event, have actually hired a professional character assassin by the name of Victor Hugo Vaca Jr. to attack me. And Victor Hugo has now posted hundreds and hundreds, John, hundreds of its savage attack videos, completely vicious. Anyone who wants to understand what I'm talking about, go to BitChute, for example, and put in Victor-Hugo, Jim Fetzer, and voila, there they are. Stunning. I'm doing my best to combat this. I've submitted formal complaints to BitChute and Rumble, where they have been utterly unresponsive. Anyone who wants to support my effort to stop this grotesque abuse of the internet, this is a form of criminal harassment, of cyberbullying, and even of elder abuse by the internet, where BitChute and Rumble are refusing to take any corrective action. if you'd like to support me in my efforts to get this remedy, visit my givesendgo.com/funding Fetzer donation page. And there you'll see a description where you can link to all the videos, what's going on here, and how this guy is doing his thing at the behest of Sandy Hook Promise. Absolutely stunning stuff, John. And the people of Connecticut deserve to know.
Great. Thank you for that, Dr. Fetzer. So just a few words on the homeschooling stuff in Connecticut, and then I'll have a few things to say about the latter part of your rejoinder there. So yeah, here I am in Connecticut myself, and I actually had the opportunity to go to a protest last Monday, where a lot of the homeschoolers came out, and one would have hoped to have seen actually just parents in general, because some of the topics that were brought up wasn't just monitoring homeschool, but had to do with medical choice and medical monitoring that should have been appropriate to all parents. And yeah, so you had the case of the one child who died, whose name began with the letter T. The last name, I forget the proper name there. That person died a few years ago, and then there was this bizarre story in Waterbury earlier this year or late last year, where an adult man was found, basically held hostage for a decade since junior high. And the state is using these two, or the busybodies in Hartford, rather, are using these two things to try to jam through ultimately legislation. Right now, they're just talking about having some sort of check-in with the school district. And interestingly enough, especially for this audience, almost the exact same story has appeared in New Jersey. So everyone should keep their ear to the track. Much like with Sandy Hook, I don't know if this guy in Waterbury even exists. I have no way to know, because he's now put in witness protection, and he has a whole new identity. So just this past week, an almost identical story was rolled out in New Jersey, and with the same reaction from Trenton about, oh, well, now we need to register homeschooling. My final point before I get to Dr. Fetzer's notice about Mr. Vaca and the Give, Send, Go, my final note is, speaking of Sandy Hook, there is obviously an agenda at play to register and to, I think, ultimately shut down alternative education altogether. Don't be surprised if there is something like a Sandy Hook within the homeschooling community. If there is going to be a false flag, who knows what that will look like? There will be some stage thing that will get everyone's attention, and it will be used as the ultimate hammer blow to knock down homeschooling in one fell swoop. Everyone should prepare for that at some point as a contingency, that there will be a bogus, who knows what it'll be. It'll be a massacre of a homeschool family by a homeschooling parent, or something graphic like that, that will get everyone on board of registration and outlawing. And then to the point about Victor Hugo, who seemed to have made a career of needling Dr. Fetzer, I have put the Give, Send, Go that Dr. Fetzer referenced down below. And I would only recommend that everyone in the truth movement who's honest needs to lock shields, and I do not believe it's the best use of time, or even a good use of time, to be coming up with all these silly things. You could, like Dr. Fetzer says, go on this man's channel, and you'll see he's just pumping out the videos. I get the updates from Rumble, and it's every other one is of this nature, mocking Dr. Fetzer and so forth. So anyway, that link is down below, and I certainly hope that your momentum continues, Dr. Fetzer, whether it's the courts in Connecticut or with support for your legal defense there.
John, I'm very encouraged by the development of Remington stepping down. That's an extraordinary occurrence. Virtually never happens. 5.5 years in advance, he took the preferred option of retiring early over being even removed from the bench, which showed a certain discretion on his part, but he ought not to have violated my legal rights, my constitutional rights under cover of law by arriving at a predetermined conclusion. And I have no doubt whatsoever it was in collusion with the Posner attorneys. And I've been calling this out, beginning with a motion to open sanctions pursuant to extrinsic fraud and fraud upon the court. Extrinsic fraud being the FEMA drill being presented as mass murder, and fraud upon the court by introducing it as though it were real, ruling out all the evidence I had to demonstrate it was fake, and then going ahead and even censoring me when I sought to expose that the party who came in and testified under oath as Leonard Posner was not the Sandy Hook Leonard Posner. He was too young and too small to be the real guy, where the judge added an additional $650,000 to the $450,000 that had been awarded by the trial for damages. I mean, this is an outrage. And not only every resident of Wisconsin is vulnerable to the improper procedures that were employed by this judge, but every resident of Connecticut ought to be outraged at the deception and involvement of the school system, of the Connecticut State Police, all the way up to the governor's office. John, if you care about the integrity of government in Connecticut, this is the perfect illustration and cause to champion. I would welcome your support.
Great. And once again, the Give, Send, Go is down below in the description. And then when you're done with that, head over to Dr. Fetzer's site. You can read that Sandy Hook PDF. I certainly have benefited from it. And there are all other sorts of books, JFK and other things all besides. Dr. Fetzer has covered many, many topics, but they're all basically dealing with fraud and exposing fraud on one level or another. And I would just finally say on my part, I live very close to Newtown. And if I haven't brought this up before, I occasionally drive through Newtown. And I know people there. And this past autumn, I was coming through the main drive there, and I noticed that the police station was empty, and it was the middle of the day, or what I thought was the police station, what I knew to be the police station. And I decided to, see what was up. And when I got home, I, lo and behold, found there's a brand new Taj Mahal police station, on the other side of town. And the old dinky one is all closed up. But everyone has been paid so much money in that town to shut up. They have a brand new police station. You better believe in my opinion, that's what the Sandy Hook promise is. It's just the federal government just laundering money to keep all these people happy and well fed and well housed in their mansions. And it's not that people will sell their souls, but how cheaply they will sell them for. Just Federal Reserve notes. Is that how cheap people's souls are? Well, apparently a lot of people in Newtown can be bought for that. So anyway, those are my little observations.
Those are wonderful and welcome observations. I thank you for your ongoing support and the privilege of joining you on your programs, which I regard as exceptional.
Great. To the audience, thank you for your attention, and thank you for those kind words, Dr. Fetzer. We'll see everyone in 2 weeks' time at the very end of May. In the meantime, check out all of our sites and get reading. And thank you, Dr. Fetzer.
My pleasure, John.